Namaste. This is Jayachandran again with my 8th video on restarting tourism. This is also my 4th on the draft tourism policy. I have already covered 8 out of 10 pillars by which this draft tourism policy is made of. Going straight to the 9th policy, which talks about market intelligence and research in tourism. Just imagine if someone who has completed his master's degree is asked to sit and study on the first standard. This is a feeling that we get when we go through this section of this draft policy. The so-called smart bureaucratic policymakers go in detail about the importance of market intelligence and research here. This section talks about gathering data about the tourist movement in the country. They propose to do it through the Bureau of Immigration, the destination management organizations, and other sources. They also talks about getting the mastery of the Statistical Institute of India on this. But it does not give any details on how an accurate data can be collected, because they say that they are going to collect the data from the immigration about the tourist arrivals. Remember, majority of the people who visit India from the neighboring South Asian countries arrive India in a tourist visa, but most of them, they have other purposes rather than tourism, for medical reason, for education of their children, and so many, and business. So this source is not going to be an authentic one. Anyone with common sense will understand that the market research, data collection should be done first before preparing this policy. That is what I mentioned in the beginning, that someone who has done a master's degree is going to sit in the first standard. That is how this policy describes about the need of market intelligence and research as part of this draft. From this draft itself, it is understood that these policy makers don't have any serious knowledge on this subject. It says that it's going to create a dashboard which will provide all this data for the tourism industry stakeholders. I'm not sure that how many of the stakeholders in the country is waiting to have such dashboard to run their businesses. And definitely it is one source for spending a few million rupees on this account. The draft talks about having research and studies in niche tourism products and also the markets. This is just like a layman's dream of constructing a palace without having a foundation. The draft also mentions about non-resident Indian visitors. But there is no modalities on how to approach this large number of Indians who are living abroad. Collecting information on overseas visitors cannot be done by just counting the number of tourist visas, as I mentioned earlier. The next pillar, which is talking about the governance, administration of tourism in the country. One of the major challenges in Indian executive system faces in the present bureaucratic line is it still have the old colonial mindset. The civil servant who is considered as a master of all trades is appointed as the head of a department like tourism and who gets a tenure of maximum 3 to 4 years. Trying to implement his imagination and his plans without having enough time to understand what exactly the need, the requirement of this particular department. That is what has been happening all these years. It is high time that we should think about having professionals to create policy and try to manage such kind of departments like tourism. Unless we change this present system, we are not going to reach the target to create India as a very popular tourist destination which impart great living experience of our culture. The draft imagines that tourism in our country can be developed and managed by a bureaucratic government-controlled official system. The Central Tourism Authority, state tourism authorities, interministerial councils, and tourism advisory board. These are all nothing but gimmicks without any clarity of plan, and as usual, a waste of time and money. The history of tourism development in India clearly shows that it grew only because it didn't have much bureaucratic intervention so far. But definitely the glamour and opportunities in tourism, its access to the world-class luxuries, etc., definitely created attention and interest in the officials. What really is needed, Ministry of Tourism must ensure proper laws in defining tourism and its activities, and there should be a proper law, an act should be enabled in the parliament to make tourism in the concurrent list. In fact, the new tourism minister who has been taken charge at the union level recently has very enthusiastically informed that our country needs a tourism policy. I request the minister to find some more time to speak to his own officials and understands the current limitations of his ministry, that it does not have any legal authority on what the proposals which is made into this draft. The policy recommends for a National Tourism Advisory Board. It says that this advisory board consists of officials and stakeholders, say that key industry leaders, stakeholder associations, and private sector players. Interestingly, the same Ministry of Tourism officially informed through right to information questions asked that they don't have any such information about the number of tourism activity providers in the country, the number of tourism organizations and associations of stakeholders, and they don't have any recognition for tourism associations in the country. So without having any such data, how and why the tourism policy asks to create an advisory board? Definitely it permits the officials of the ministry to include some of the people in their good books and formulate the advisory board. Such kind of gimmicks will not do good for the industry. So ministry must have a clarity on what its proposals in the draft. It should first start looking at what data is required to prepare a policy. It should have a very wide open forum for debates and collecting information from all sources from different segments of the tourism industry. And from that, with the data collected, the ministry should be preparing this policy. I'm sure and I wish that the the present Union Minister for Tourism, will use his common sense and understand the seriousness of this draft tourism policy to take initiatives to get this in the right track. In totality, this draft tourism policy is an eyewash, just to put an image that the government is doing something very big for the tourism. It is also very sad to note that so far, not many tourism industry stakeholders and their organizations have not considered to go through this draft and come out with proper direction, suggestions on getting the track of this draft into the right direction. I'm sure that the industry stakeholders and individual professionals in this industry will do the needful to create a better platform for more debates on this draft and help the government in finding the right direction to lead the future of tourism in our country. The draft policy also talks about sustainable and responsible tourism, the two terminologies which is now very commonly spoken in all tourism forums. But these two are used without having much substance on it. Since the entire draft policy itself does not have substance, I'm not going to elaborate on this particular aspect which is mentioned as a cross-arcing pillar on this draft policy. I hope my efforts in trying to bring some attention on the need of a serious debate on this draft tourism policy has helped a few, at least, to understand the basics of this draft tourism policy. But I request more serious and meaningful debates are initiated by all stakeholders of tourism industry and come forward to give proper suggestions to the government in making the tourism policy of India a reality soonest. Thank you very much, and kindly do subscribe my channel and also share this to as many in the travel industry so that it will start yielding its fruits soon.